I want to start with Dan Campbell because he basically spent a lot of his time talking about Adam Trautman, the new third-round draft pick of the New Orleans Saints. They traded up to get Trautman, if you remember, at the end of round 3, and that should have ended the Saints draft when they traded up, but they ended up coming back into the draft to get Tommy Stevens. But Saints tight end coach Dan Campbell talking about his early impressions of their new rookie tight end, Trautman.
He was a guy that I felt like popped off the tape. I know that he went to a smaller school, but man, when you watched his film, there was something about him. He's got this twitch about him. He's got some quickness. He can beat man coverage. He did it repeatedly. He's good in zone, good with the ball in his hands. And then you see him line up and put his hand in the ground and get after people in the run game. So, I was intrigued by this guy. And then you go and watch him compete at the Senior Bowl. And that's where, to me, I got really excited, because then you can see where and how much he learned just over the course of a week, and what kind of potential he does have.
The thing that should get people most excited. So you heard Dan Campbell there, and he's kind of a throwback tight end, of course, from his career, and now he's coaching with the Saints as tight ends coach. But the thing that should get people excited when he talks about how athletic he is, he pops on tape, how he can catch, but also he can put his hand in the dirt and get after people. There's really one tight end in the NFL that really, Gronk, I guess, but there's really one guy that meets that description. And Dan Campbell brought him up today.
To find a guy that can do both, that you feel like can be a difference maker in the pass game, but yet be able to help you in the run game, not just function in the run game, but really help you to where you don't feel like he's got a weakness to, we need to take him out of the game or take him out of this play, and then we'll put him in for this. But a guy that you feel like can handle multiple positions and be able to produce at all of them. I think those guys are hard to find. And honestly, probably the best thing that's happened to our league from a tight end perspective has been the Kittle explosion, because Kittle he's a complete tight end. And when you watch him, he and guys like Gronk, those are rare guys. But that's brought this whole. When you talk to all these guys in the combine coming out now, it's the new wave. Like who do you see yourself as? Oh man, it's George Kittle. It's George Kittle. And I think that's a good thing, because you ask him why, and it's because he can do it all.
Now, I don't know necessarily if that's the new wave. Just looking at the college game, it seems like you're seeing more of O.J. Howard, Eric Gilbert, guys like that. I don't mean at that level, but that style of tight end. The tight end who's really a flex receiver, not so much a blocker. But because that guy like Kittle, like Gronk, is so rare, when you find one, it's a mismatch because nobody has one to go against. How do you prepare for that guy in practice when nobody else has one? Is Dan Campbell basically saying they just drafted George Kittle? Is that what Adam Trautman is? Man, if that's the case, that is super exciting. Because at that position, I know you got Jared Cook, but he's not long for New Orleans. He's making a lot of money, and he'll be here for this year and possibly gone after that. You've always kept around that guy like Josh Hill out of necessity because Sean Payton loves that guy that can be a blocker and help in the pass game. If you have an elite level blocker that's also an elite pass catcher, if you have the next Gronk or Kittle, is that what they drafted? If so, we may look back in half a decade at this Saints draft because of Trautman and think even more of it than we do now if he becomes that guy. Long way to go to prove that out. But man, that got me pumped when I heard Dan Campbell today basically call Adam Trautman Kittle. One more from Dan Campbell, who elaborated a bit more on Troutman's. We've heard so much about him as a pass catcher, but Campbell talked even more about his ability to block.
Listen, that was one of the things that caught my eye about him. And honestly, I went and watched the Senior Bowl first before I watched even his season. And I see a guy, and I knew he was from Dayton, but what you saw was a guy who fundamentally was raw, a little bit raw, particularly in the run game. But man, he is like throwing his body in there, and he's doing whatever he can to finish blocks, and he's aggressive and he's tough. And I'm like, my gosh, man, a player that's got his ability to be able to see him do those things and to the nastiness of the game and the want to and the finish and the toughness and the, the grit. And it's like, okay, I'd love to work with that guy.
Man, that is super exciting to think what the Saints might have stumbled into there in round 3. If there's one thing that kind of gives you pause, and this is why the Senior Bowl is so important when you're talking about guys like Trautman, because you can watch on film a guy like Trautman and he could be dominant, but it's fair to say, yeah, but he's playing at Dayton. What does he do? What would it be like if he were in the SEC going against Auburn and Bama and Florida and Georgia every week? Well, the only way you really get that a glimpse into that is how he does in the Senior Bowl practices when he's going to be going against the best senior college football players in the country. And your impressions coming away from that week were Gronk, Kittle, in. That got me pumped listening to Dan Campbell talk about Adam Trautman. I mean, a lot of people had sung his praises. Mike Detillier had him graded highly. There were a lot of people who had Trautman as a second-round pick grade, and the Saints nabbed him in the back of round 3. I mean, it was largely a celebrated pick, but I got even more excited listening to Campbell talk about him today.